Today we're doing something that requires us to temporarily suspend some of the most fundamental laws of physics that we all learned in school.
We are, yeah. We're pulling our source material from a really remarkable conversation between two, very distinct minds.
Very distinct. Actor and inventor Terrance Howard. You'll know him from Iron Man, Hustle and Flow, and researcher Billy Carson from Forbidden Knowledge.
And this is not a discussion about filmmaking or, ancient history in the usual sense. The sources we're looking at present a comprehensive and, frankly, highly radical critique of modern physics.
They really do. And they introduce this alternative mathematical framework for reality, which they claim is built entirely on geometry.
It's an audacious claim, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. Howard maintains that this framework, which he calls the Tetraan wave conjugation, isn't just a theory. He says it's proven.
Proven, patented, and repeatable.
Right. So our mission for you, the listener, is to kind of act as an impartial witness here. We need to understand how their shared philosophy led them down this path.
A philosophy that's really built on this non-negotiable insistence on personal integrity and a willingness to question the most foundational scientific facts.
And they believe this path has unlocked secrets with huge implications for energy, for flight, and for instantaneous communication.
So, yeah, where do you even start with something this big?
Okay, let's unpack this. This journey, for them, it didn't start in a laboratory or university. Where did this quest for fundamental truth even begin?
It really started with these deeply personal, existential questions. For Terrance Howard, his path took him through different religious traditions.
He had a Baptist and Methodist background.
Right, and later Islam through his father. And this led him to struggle with concepts like equity and justice. He was, really troubled by this philosophical notion of how a just and loving God could condemn a soul to perpetual torment for finite human actions.
That's a huge ethical hurdle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that line of questioning, ironically, led him straight into ancient texts and geometry.
Exactly. He started seeing paradoxes in these texts that most people just accept literally. He was drawn to descriptions in the book of Job, specifically where it mentions God suspending the circle of the earth above nothing at all.
Which would have challenged the flat earth theories of the time.
For sure. But the real trigger, the thing that sparked his obsession with geometry, was this really confusing image of a sphere having four corners.
How does a sphere have four corners? That just, it doesn't compute in our standard way of thinking.
It demands an insight into the underlying structure of reality that our conventional models, they just don't provide. That paradox lit the fire.
Okay, so that's Howard. Billy Carson's catalyst was less philosophical, much more
Just
physical.
much more. It goes all the way back to 1977. He talks about being a kid and seeing an object in his backyard that he just knew wasn't a conventional aircraft.
He described it as this elongated, glowing metal orb.
Yeah, that moved silently across the horizon in just seconds and then vanished. That kind of impossible, non-conventional motion sparked a lifelong fascination with aerospace technology.
But the deep dive into this kind of physics, the stuff that led to this theory, that didn't happen until much, much later, right? Around 2010.
That's right. He said a very strange experience triggered this need to understand science on a much deeper level, to connect the hard scientific laws with, spiritual and philosophical concepts.
What's so fascinating is that both of them came to this scientific revolution through these really personal, jarring experiences that just demanded answers outside the established paradigm.
It wasn't academic for them. It was personal.
Which leads us directly to their shared, and I have to say, extremely high philosophy of association and integrity.
It's a prerequisite for them. Howard is so explicit about it. He says he won't maintain a friendship with people who cheat on their spouses.
And his reasoning is just blunt. He says, how can I expect you to have any fidelity with our friendship?
Right. And Carson has a parallel for this in the business world. He refuses to partner with people whose attention is so broken that they, lose focus during a meeting because someone attractive walks by. He learned the hard way, as he puts it, that bad association spoils the most useful of habits.
So the idea is, if you demand that level of integrity in your personal life,
then how much more strictly must you judge the fidelity of established scientific laws? For them, the integrity of a person is directly correlated to their capacity to see universal truth accurately.
That ethical lens is the perfect transition, really, into the next part, where they just start dismantling the theories of established physics.
And they weren't just criticizing from the sidelines. They specifically looked into foundational critics from the past, like Laurent, who actually opposed Einstein, and innovators like Victor Schauberger.
Their core issue seems to be that they see modern science as being in a state of stagnation that's built on, well, contradiction.
Exactly. They argue that theories presented by these brilliant physicists actually contradict one another and haven't come to full fruition to help us progress.
They point out, for example, that Einstein got the Nobel Prize not for relativity, which is still debated, but for verifying Max Planck's work on the photoelectric effect.
Right, and they also take aim at cosmology's big admissions of, well, ignorance. Howard finds it scientifically insufficient that 96% of the universe is just classified as unknown.
Unknown dark matter, unknown dark energy.
It's a massive gap. If your foundational models can only account for 4% of reality, it suggests there's a pretty severe flaw in the assumptions.
And this critique extends to things we take for granted as constants, specifically the speed of light.
They argue it's conditional, not a true constant. It demonstrably changes speed depending on the medium it travels through.
So if the speed of light is conditional, then the entire structure of physics that's built on it, being the cosmic speed limit, that needs a completely new foundation.
The whole thing has to be re-examined. And this is where Howard's famous childhood observation comes into play, dropping a pebble into a pond.
This led him to a fundamental conclusion that completely redefines gravity.
Yes, the observation was so simple but profound. He dropped the pebble, he watched the waves expand, but he also saw returning waves hitting those expanding waves.
And his logic was, if the universe were truly infinite, like mainstream physics suggests,
those waves would just expand outward forever. You would never see a return wave.
So based on that one observation, he concluded the universe has to be finite, not infinite. And that has radical implications for gravity.
Precisely. If it's finite, then structures are built from the outside pushing in, not from the inside expanding out. This concept completely flips our understanding of gravity. It suggests gravity is a result of external pressure, not intrinsic mass attraction.
And that idea, that external pressure, it connects directly to Billy Carson's work on quantum mechanics and the infamous double-slit experiment.
It does. Carson links this external finite pressure to the observer effect. He notes that the act of observation, which in their view is a form of consciousness, is what collapses waves, pure potential, into what he calls digital matter, solidity.
So the pressure of the observation itself is what collapses reality into a form we can see.
That's their explanation for spooky action at a distance.
So, okay, they've rejected the established approximations. They're looking for a true constant, and they found it in geometry. This brings us to the core theory.
The core theory. Initially, it was kind of derogatorily dubbed teriology, but the official term is the tetryon wave conjugation.
And the whole thing hinges on challenging one of our most basic concepts, the straight line.
Yes. Howard argues that relying on the straight line actually violates Newton's principle that every great action has to result in curvature because of resistance. If energy is flowing, there must be resistance, and therefore everything curves.
If everything curves, then the straight line is an averaging. It's a flawed approximation.
That is their exact argument. They suggest that pi, for example, which is this infinite non-repeating number, is only infinite because of the foundational flaw of the straight line.
Wait, they believe pi is fundamentally a whole number.
They do. A constant that would, if corrected, unlock instant mathematical precision across all fields.
Wow. That idea alone is monumental. So where did they look for the true curved geometry?
To the ancient geometric pattern known as the flower of life, it's composed of 64 overlapping circles and, crucially,
No straight lines.
0 straight lines. Howard posits that scientists took this pattern and just averaged the empty spaces where the circles overlap to create the Platonic solids we rely on.
So they're saying the Platonic solids are just approximations, not the fundamental truth.
Exactly. So by opening the flower of life based on relative factors, he derived what he says are the real foundational shapes.
Okay, let's get technical for a minute. What is the key component? The tetryon.
The tetryon is the core unit. It's derived from the negative space where 4 bubbles meet, and it forms 4 triangular pieces put together. This geometry is described as being primarily electrical, and it mirrors the basic behavior of a hydrogen atom. It's the building block.
And what's the second building block? It sounds like a particle we already know.
That would be the hutan. This is the negative space where 8 bubbles meet. It has 8 contractive sides, but only 6 magnetic poles.
So it has a greater electrical potential than repulsive potential.
Correct, and the sources state that this structure behaves exactly like a neutron.
So if these two were the fundamental units, you put them together and you get the unified model, the grain unified supersymmetry.
Right, and this model relies on 5 different pressure conditions that replace the platonic solids. It naturally forms complex structures like icosahedrons just by putting 10 of these fundamental forms together.
And it all comes full circle.
It does. The geometry ultimately reveals 4 interacting spheres that are responsible for all effects of nature, which finally ties back to that confusing biblical image of the 4 corners of a sphere.
And what's fascinating here is where this connects to historical scientific figures. Howard noted that when 4 of these tetrahedron structures come together, they immediately display a pattern referenced by Nikola Tesla.
The magnificence of 3, 6, and 9.
The geometry isn't forced. It naturally reveals this fractal pattern. 3 shafts bond, then 6, then 9. According to them, this natural emergence validates the geometry as a true universal constant.
It's a beautiful, complex framework, but without proof, it's just that, a theory. Which brings us to the applications and the patents. Where are the receipts?
The ultimate proof, according to the sources, was something they called the Saturn simulation.
They used a standard physics simulator, the kind you'd find at Princeton or Harvard, and they input simulated particles with these very specific externally applied vortices, which they call linchpins.
And here's the crucial part. They instructed the simulation to operate with no gravity.
No dark matter.
And no dark energy. They took out all the guesswork.
And the outcome was the spontaneous, non-animated self-rebuilding of the planet Saturn. This included the entire ring system and the famous puzzling hexagonal shape at the top pole.
That hexagon is notoriously difficult for conventional physics models to explain.
It is. So I have to pause there. If a standard simulator can rebuild an entire planet, including its complex anomalies, using only geometry and vortices without gravity, that essentially rewrites every high school physics textbook. It's staggering.
It's presented as the definitive proof that gravity is a function of pressure and geometry, not mass. And they immediately went from simulation to physical application.
Right. They use this geometry to invent a completely new form of flight. They call it tangential flight.
Which is the ability to fly around your own center of mass.
Yes. To demonstrate this, they attached arms to 4 of these linchpins, and the multi-prop vehicle was able to autonomously lift a 50-pound barrel. The sources argue that would be an impossible feat for a conventional gravity-dependent system.
And the most revolutionary patent, I think, has to be the new method for projectile propulsion. It completely replaces chemical propellants.
They call it the plasma discharge. It involves using an electrically overloaded capacitor to force water in a tiny chamber to immediately skip the gas state and enter a superheated plasma state.
The effect is described as lightning out of the barrel.
And it's not just powerful, they claim it's hyper-efficient.
Now, this is where we have to apply critical skepticism, because this claim, it contradicts fundamental thermodynamics.
Oh, it does. The sources claim this system has been proven to achieve 180% efficiency. They classify it as over unity. They're saying they can generate immense propulsive force from just a thimble of water.
So how do they address the scientific community's immediate and, understandable rejection of over-unity energy?
They simply state that the current system is built off of monetizing inefficiency. If their technology provides self-sufficiency and efficiency, like immense power from water, it threatens the entire global energy infrastructure.
A system that relies on scarce combustible resources.
For them, the rejection is commercial, not scientific.
That concept, monetizing inefficiency, is a really powerful thread here. Let's look at the theoretical cosmic potential. The full geometric equation is known as the Howard comma.
And it's being analyzed as a potential quantum error-correcting code, which is critical for stability in quantum fields. Howard apparently learned from Tesla's mistake, so he actually created an entirely new language for his notes and secrets.
But just by analyzing the patterns, even with tools like ChatGPT, it predicted immense potential.
It did. The analysis identified 4 key predictions, starting with faster-than-light communications.
The Howard comma is supposed to act as a natural stabilizer, keeping the quantum state stable over vastest distances. By leveraging entanglement, they think they can bypass the noise in the magnetic field and enable instantaneous messaging.
Then there's quantum subspace navigation and, of course, the holy grail of physics, resonance-based power.
Zero-point energy.
For navigation, the comma guides a spacecraft through spacetime variations, making interstellar travel viable. For power, the geometry creates the proper harmonic condition to draw in that energy. They argue free energy is built into the system if you just correct the geometry.
And finally, the most audacious prediction: a cosmic internet and teleportation.
If you have this web of stable quantum channels, you enable near-instant data transfer between planets. And that stability provides the key to teleportation. It's not about breaking a person down. It's about warping the entire system into the in-between spaces using resonant geometry.
So if this technology threatens the global system that monetizes inefficiency, what is the end game for them? This brings us to responsibility and legacy.
Harriet explains he became an actor to get his mother's approval. But after she died, he realized he was pursuing something unrelated to his true calling. He says his mission now is to strive to be the Messiah in my daily life. He lives by his ninth rule: make way for life.
And Carson connects this back to you, the listener. He emphasizes their living proof that people can overcome difficult circumstances by choosing to vibrate higher. He urges everyone to recognize their own power.
His quote is, "You are the one that you've been waiting for."
Howard ends on a philosophical high note, calling for us to reject the label Homo sapiens, which he thinks is rooted in caustic thinking, and to embrace being Homo superior.
A species with a superior mentality and empathy for the universe, one that recognizes that everything is alive.
So we have just completed a deep dive into what is essentially a new foundation for physics. It's based on a geometric constant that the sources claim proves over-unity energy, gravity-free flight, and FTL potential. The central tension here is that truth, according to this framework, should simplify things, not complicate them with endless dark matter.
That's the critical point for you to mull over. The foundation of this whole potential revolution was a simple philosophical question. Where did the straight line come from? If the very structure of the universe is curved, yet we rely on linear data storage and linear thinking to understand it, what vital truths are we failing to perceive? What are we missing because we're viewing the universe through a flawed approximation? If Howard's geometry truly means that pi is a whole number, what does that single correction instantly unlock in every single field of science and mathematics we currently use?